I recently got to check out the Xiaomi Mi A2 Lite, my first Android One device, and one that really took my fancy. Well, GearBest saw that video, and thanks to GearBest themselves, and you lot for watching the videos, I got to check out the Xiaomi Mi A2. So hey guys, my name's Ryan Thompson with Failtech, and this is my Xiaomi Mi A2 review. Android One has to be the headlining feature of this device, and it's the underlying clean, stock, fresh, smooth Android experience that turns a mid-range phone like this from grotty to great. I will hand on heart say that without Android One, this device probably would flop in the Western market. This phone doesn't run the latest software yet, but the 8.1 build on here is very good, identical to the Lite version from my point of view, and so my thoughts from that phone software carries over to this fairly seamlessly. If you enjoy stock Android, you'll more than likely enjoy Android One and its benefits. Quicker updates than skinned options, little to no bloat whatsoever, unparalleled speed and fluidity, and the plain materialistic aesthetic. But if you want more options and more features, go for LG, Huawei or Samsung. Just don't expect to get the same great performance. I happen to love the software experience on this thing though, and maybe that's because I was a big fan of the Nexo phones way back when, on the Snapdragon S4 days. And it's not all about UX and UI. Android One promises to deliver stellar security patches and bug fixes along the way. I've already had like 2 or 3 updates and I've only had the device for a week or so. Okay, I've nattered on about software enough. What about the hardware? What does the Mi A2 feel like? Well, in a word, boring. And I mean that in the nicest of ways because the build and design of this handset is really good. Not premium, but really good. We get an excellently ergonomic, if slightly slippery, tapered aluminium back, which I think looks really good in this mattish black colour. A massive camera bump, I mean this thing is deep and spacious. An absolute unit. Some Xiaomi and Android One branding towards the lower back, a notchless glass front, fairly featureless sides with some noteworthy clicky buttons, very tactile, which I love to see, and a weight to size ratio that feels weirdly natural compared to the dense feeling iPhone X that I use. The rear mounted fingerprint scanner is quick and accurate, if nothing exceptional like Huawei's or Oppo's scanners, but just like the Lite, I found it to be a tad too shallow. Lack of a headphone jack, expandable storage, official English protection and wireless charging will be a massive collective turn-off for some, although the only really offensive omission in my opinion is the water and dust resistance one. And I suppose this hardware really does speak for the rest of the phone. A boring phone that gets the job done, it just does what it needs to, and does it in a decent way. No frills, no gimmicks, just bliss. And that can quite easily be attributed to what's under the bonnet of the Mi A2. We've got Snapdragon 660, Adreno 512, 4GB of RAM, 32GB of storage with different configurations available, and the aforementioned Android One software, a well-rounded spec sheet for a well-rounded device. Performance numbers aren't far off flagships at this price in regards to Geekbench, Antutu and Speedtest. And with something as clean as Android One series, you'll be hard pressed to find a noticeable speed increase in day-to-day applications when using either of these phones. I'm serious, multitasking, watching YouTube videos, browsing through social media, and even like gaming are pretty close experiences. And if you're writing emails and notes on here, it's fantastic. It's only when we delve into some more demanding workloads that the Mi A2 struggles just a little bit with the likes of 3D titles challenging it. The one thing I can say that I found weird about the performance of the Mi A2 though was definitely this weird lag and slight lack of responsiveness with the touch digitizer. So when you kind of swipe up and down, it kind of takes a little bit. There's a bit of lag. I'll try and put some slow-mo B-roll in there. Although I am coming from flagship, so maybe I'm just used to that. So with that in mind, how about the display? Well, the near 6-inch 2160 by 1080 IPS panel is more than sharp enough at 403 ppi, and fits the trendy 2:1 aspect ratio that a lot of high-end 2018 phones follow. And since we miss out on the notch, we get an awesome symmetrical front with on-screen nav buttons and slightly rounded corners. But remember that weird shadow thing I talked about in the Mi A2 Lite video? Yeah, that's on here too. I'm not sure if it's Xiaomi's fault or the manufacturer of the panel's fault, but it's here, it's noticeable to me, and it's not very good. Other than that, viewing angles are pretty good in general, and I liked the vibrant yet accurate colours. Funnily enough, testing indie games and 2D games, even like Crossy Road, really show how colourful this display is and how brilliant it can get. As I mentioned before, it omits the notch, which is fantastic news, meaning that your viewing experience isn't inhibited, refreshing to say at the very least, and the solo bottom firing speaker is easy to cover. I feel like the amount of hybrid earpiece setups, this disappoints just a tad because there are so many better options. And you don't get a headphone jack, just kind of adds insult to injury. Of course, a really important factor of a smartphone, especially in 2018, is the battery. And that's where I feel the Mi A2 kind of brings it all together. A really average battery life. 3000 mAh isn't that big. I mean, the low power system on a chip, not super high res display, and very light Android One software all combine to make that 3000 mAh seem a little bit more reasonable. I'd say the battery helps the phone last me a full day of combination of social media browsing and light video watching on a combination of Wi-Fi and 4G. If you play heaps of games or watch like seasons of video at a time, then I would steer clear and go for something with a slightly larger battery. But just in case it doesn't make it through a full day, we get quick charging 3.0, and it helps you top up at lunchtime and just to guarantee that extra runtime, though that charging connector is only USB 2.0 Type-C, which will be important if you're transferring a lot of files over USB, which I suppose not a lot of people are these days. And we can't end without talking about cameras. And whilst the Mi A2 isn't going to top the DxOMark charts, it's certainly very good for the price. On the back, 2 cameras are present, with the same focal length and lens aperture, but with different resolution sensors and pixel size. Other specs include UHD video, stabilised FHD video, and slow motion video added in there for good measure. And there's also a front camera with a massively dense 20 megapixel sensor with f2.2 glass that sits on its lonesome just above the display. But ignoring specs and just going with the resulting images, I'm pleasantly surprised. Now, I'm not going to be swapping out my Pixel 2 or iPhone 10 anytime soon, as the camera really does have to bring that shutter down in low light due to the lack of image stabilization, and you can really see it in this morning shot of a dark tree taken around 7 AM. But in good light, images are crisp with a bit of croppability, maintain good dynamic range, actually better than I was expecting, and the f1.8 aperture makes the natural bokeh look pretty good. However, you probably are going to want to rely on that natural bokeh because the portrait mode really isn't that good. It may work 5% of the time, but the other 95% of the time there's just really bad edge detection, and the overall dynamic range comes down quite a bit. I'm not really sure why. In terms of UHD video, whilst dynamic range takes a hit and focus seeking is a little bit annoying, the clarity, sharpness and actually colours are all very good and more than enough for an occasional Twitter, Insta or Facebook post. We also get 720p video at 120 FPS, the only slow motion mode, and the quality doesn't take a massive hit in this mode. I feel like it's what makes this slow motion, like the low spec of it, look pretty decent in some circumstances, just because it doesn't have to lower that shutter speed so much. Flipping around to the front, that 20 megapixel selfie camera produces some fairly crisp images. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was, despite the 20 megapixel number. Images are crisp and vibrant, translating to a great Instagram machine. Selfie video is a bit shaky and doesn't support fantastic dynamic range, finding it hard to adjust exposure sometimes, but the results for seemingly the 100th time are impressive for the price. The app itself is fairly plain in UI with flat buttons and a carousel style layout of modes, but the excellent submenus let you change the settings as you see fit. A good balance, if a little bit inspired. So rounding out for the cameras, we get surprisingly good results from a slightly unexceptional spec sheet. Other little bits I noticed when reviewing the Mi A2, the notification LED is very well positioned above the display, but instead of like slowly fading, it kind of stair steps in terms of brightness, which is something I found odd. It's not a bad point by any means, but it's just a bit weird. The assets on the screen are slightly larger out of the box than I'd like. Obviously you can change that in settings, but I just found it a bit weird. And there is a massively welcomed double tap of the power button to get the camera. In conclusion, I'd say that the Mi A2 is a fantastically boring piece of hardware combined with an exceptionally boring piece of software. Something that works incredibly seamlessly, balances features with fluidity, and in a sea of bezel-less, headphone portless, non-expandable smartphones, whilst not doing much to stand out, is more than enough for most people and will help you in your everyday life. Although in my opinion, if you're going to go for one of them, go for the much more featureful Mi A2 Lite. I'll leave both links in the video description to go to GearBest. If you click on those, I'll get a small kickback and it really does help the channel out. And that's it from me, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Please do like, dislike, comment, subscribe if you're new around here to know most video like this one. I want to give a massive shout out to my patrons and also to GearBest for sending me out the smartphone. Like, it's the first smartphone I've been sent out. It's kind of a big achievement for me. So thank you, GearBest, for that. And again, if you want to help the channel even more, just go, you can click that link and buy whatever you want. But it does help the channel and it improves relations, so hopefully we can get some more smartphones into test. I recommend that you check out my social media, links will be in the video description as always. Discord is especially useful. I've been Ryan Thomas for Failtech and I will see you in the next one. Peace.